All right, what is going on, everybody? I am not the usual voice of the Fans First Football Show. I am not BAD. I am not Brian Anthony Davis. I am Hogan, the host of Foxborough Frenzy, and just usual compatriot here. Oh, Patriot. See, I'd love to throw the little Patriot
There
tidbit
you
in there.
go.
Of course, I had to shout my team out. I am here with my good buddy Reed, who again is not locked up somewhere from celebrating the Eagles Super Bowl still. So we're glad to have him. Brian and Jess Place, both affiliates with Fans First Sports Network. They are not with us tonight, but they are here in spirit with the two of us. Buddy, we're here to talk about free agency. Last week's episode, Brian and I broke it down. We had a special guest where we talked about the top 10 free agents that were on the board that he thought were going to be interesting to keep an eye on. A little bit of news started breaking during the episode last week. This week, we are a full week into the free agency frenzy that is going on right now. And man, what do you think so far? Let me throw it to you first, Reed. What do you think about the free agency buzz so far? I know your team. We got a little bit of talking to do about the Philadelphia Eagles and a lack of what they've been doing, I should say. But what do you think overall so far?
I mean, free agency madness is the best. It's so much fun. Of course, Twitter goes down at the worst possible time, like right at the start of free agency, which was terrible. But it doesn't get better than this. And especially, I think a lot of people were going in to this free agency period saying it's a little bit lackluster, which, maybe comparatively to past years it was, but it's still the best. I mean, just seeing all these names moving around, it's awesome. But I think we're on the complete opposite sides of the spectrum here, Hogan. I mean, your Patriots are making moves all over the place, most cap space in the NFL, throwing the money around. Well, obviously the Steelers or the Eagles have to pay our young guys, and we're losing a lot. But if you tuned into Broad Street LinkedIn, I think we expected all of these losses. The one that really surprised me was CJGJ, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. We'll get into that, but yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. You can't pay everyone, and if you do go ahead and win a Super Bowl, as coming from your dynasties, these guys are going to get paid. So yeah, it's been exciting so far.
That's the biggest thing. I mean, obviously, we sit here on two opposite sides of the spectrum, like you said, but in all reality, I'd rather be in your position coming off a Super Bowl win, losing guys, because it's like, hey, I got to celebrate my team won, where I got to see that 6 different times, obviously, with my Patriots. And I know better than anybody the absolute casualties you take
Oh,
across the
yeah.
board, whether it's players, coaches, anything that just you get decimated. Like I said, the biggest thing is when you win the Super Bowl, everybody's stock on that team rises, whether they deserve it or not. And
100%.
believe it or not, the first guy that I want to talk about that obviously is links to both of us is obviously Milton Williams, who signed with the
Yes.
Patriots, who got that monster deal. I think it was 4 years, 104 million.
Yeah.
You got to talk about it because obviously you know him better than I do, but now I'm going to
100%.
know him.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
the big thing is I look at Milton Williams and this is my perspective on it as a Patriots fan. I'm not upset by the signing. I'm interested to see how he matches up to what the Patriots are willing to pay him because obviously he was on a loaded defensive front there where you had
Mhm.
Jalen Carter, you had Sweat, you had guys that were just beasts across the board. So, of course, getting the 2 sacks in the Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes, of course his stock was going to shoot through the roof where everybody's like, hey, look at this kid. He's 25. He's a monster. He's doing all this kind of stuff. He absolutely massacred Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Yeah, sign him to a huge deal. Looking at it from my perspective, I haven't seen enough tape to really sit there and be like, okay, this is the next coming of Warren Sapp or, Albert Hainsworth in his heyday when he wasn't, 400 pounds and not running the 40 for the life of him. But let me hear from an Eagles fan. Where do you think his deal lines up for the Patriots? Did the Patriots get a good deal here, or is Williams just signing at the perfect time for him?
I have a good buddy who's a Patriots fan. He's kind of a little bit of a Debbie Downer, not as positive as you, Hogan, but he's just like in this notion that they're going to have to overpay like most players just to, fill the holes in the roster. The thing about Milton Williams, the biggest thing I would say is he's never going to really, I mean, obviously he had 2.5 sacks in the Super Bowl, but if you just look at the stats, you're going to be like, oh my God, why are we paying this guy 104 million? Fun fact, it's actually the highest contract in Patriots history because
Yep.
Brady was taking those pay cuts. But dude, I mean, I kind of think of him as more of like a Fletcher Cox in a way that, he's not going to jump off the stat sheet, but his effect on the game can't go unnoticed. He'll do a good job creating QB pressures and stopping the run there. Um, I don't want to plant the seed of doubt in your mind. But, the 2022, it kind of reminds me of Javon Hargrave. Javon Hargrave was an absolute freak on the Eagles D line. The Niners actually signed him to a huge deal and kind of fell off a little bit. And it's impossible to really know because you are right. Like with a defensive line like that, it's easy for a lot of guys to eat when Jalen Carter's eating up those double teams. He was on my dream scenario for him to come back. I knew he wouldn't. I mean, look at the signing. There's no way we were going to be able to bring him back. But he was the unsung hero on that D line this year, and I'm happy that he got his flowers in the Super Bowl. And I wish him nothing but the best, and I hope he excels with you guys. I'm happy he's not in the NFC. Let me tell you that. So,
no, for sure. I mean, the biggest thing that I keep looking at is if Christian Barmore, the nose tackle for us, comes back and he's healthy and he's able to get back to his kind of prime that he had a year ago before the injuries and whatnot. They could be a two-headed monster on the field for us, which I would love to see the next coming of, him and Jalen Carter reincarnated with him and Christian Barmore in Patriots land over here.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it happens or not remains to be seen. But one guy, I want to throw it to you now where we talked about Milton Williams for my guys. The Zach Bond train is going to keep on rolling.
Oh, it's going to roll.
And I know if there's one guy who would not be the most ecstatic person in the world, and I promise everybody listening out there, Reed absolutely runs that Zach Bond lover account. I know he does. Don't let him lie to you on Instagram. If you follow that, that's Reed all the way. Reed, how you feeling about Zach Bond coming back to the Eagles?
First of all, shout out Zach_Bond_worshiper. He's the man. I've DM'd with him back and forth. I don't know if he listens, but he's the man. He has the most hilarious content. But yeah, I'm ecstatic. Obviously, I just, I was a little bit worried, just a little bit going into it because Howie just historically never pays linebackers. But he was actually asked about it at the combine, and he said it's not due to the position, like whatever, like kind of saying like we're gonna keep our guys. And he was the only free agent that we over at Broad Street LinkedIn predicted was going to stay. We actually had all these other guys leaving. I mean, we hoped Becton would stay. Obviously, he didn't. But, I mean, how can you not re-sign the guy who was, first team, all-pro, highest graded linebacker according to PFF. I mean, I was praising him literally the whole year. I mean, I know Brian would be clowning me right now, but he's my guy. And I think everyone in Philly loves him. He's our core for sure. He's like the oldest guy on that defense with Brandon Graham gone now. So, yeah, I mean, so happy, dude. Couldn't be happier.
No, absolutely. And the biggest thing is like you hit the nail on the head. He was actually a front runner for Defensive Player of the Year for a while there too. And obviously showed in the Super Bowl, he had an interception at one point. I mean, he had a chance to be the MVP because that whole defense should have gotten MVP as far as I'm concerned. So absolutely, if Zach Bond was going to go anywhere, it's probably best to see him back in the Eagles jersey because he just shined there with Vic Fangio and those guys there. So absolutely kudos to you guys. Now, the big thing that I want to talk to you about with the Eagles, where they obviously, you touched on where they lost a lot of players as well. Looking at this free agency class where, like you said, it was a little bit lackluster in terms of star power across the board, because I think you saw a lot of guys get extended or wrapped up before free agency started. From your perspective as an Eagles fan, was there anybody out there that you really had your eye on that you really wanted to go get that the Eagles didn't have previously? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, shoot, man, I'm so spoiled. I think everyone was kind of agrees. It's kind of almost used as a slack on Jalen Hurts, which I don't really like. But dude, the roster's so stacked, and I just know for a fact that we just can't pay everyone, and I know Howie's making it a priority to sign these young guys. So, to be completely honest, as spoiled as it sounds, honestly, no. Darius Slay leaving, I think Howie has a lot of belief in Keely Ringo and maybe even Eli Ricks. Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, obviously on the D line, but Jalix Hunt and Marojmo are still on their rookie contracts, and they both popped off in the Super Bowl. And, we lost a lot of backups, which is understandable. And they were good backups. Isaiah Rodgers to the Vikings. Oren Burks, after Nakobe Dean got hurt, comes in and plays phenomenal. He's going to the Bengals. And Kenny Gainwell going to Brian's Steelers. But, like I said, all the guys that we have that are young, I think Howie really believes in them to come through. Will Shipley, the new running back. We obviously brought in A.J. Dillon. I think the tush push is going to go for 10 yards now with Jalen, Saquon, and A.J. combined squat like 2,100 pounds. But, yeah, I mean, I know you've been in this spot multiple times, and it's just it's kind of a good feeling where it's like we're not really missing anything.
That's honestly the biggest thing. Is I was talking to another buddy of mine about, the free agency craziness going on in the offseason. The biggest thing is you always notice, especially where you touched on, where the Patriots had the biggest cap money to move around to buy these players. You don't want to be in that position because that means your team sucked last year, which the Patriots absolutely did. So it's understandable, but it's also one of those things where I looked at, because I made a remark about how the Chiefs have done next to nothing if you look at it, and it's
I'm surprised they brought back Bolton, but they somehow got that done. But besides that, they've done nothing.
I mean, Justin Reed left, and it's just like looking at them. And DeAndre Hopkins, I think, went to the Ravens as well. So they're not.
Talk about a wide receiver graveyard, dude. All the wide receivers go to Baltimore to die. Dez Bryant, Deshaun Jackson.
That's it's funny that you bring that up, because I brought that up to my my other podcast that I do, Between the Tackles, where we talked about that, and he was like, I put him as my worst signing, because it's just like, oh, okay, Odell Beckham went there and did nothing.
Yeah,
it's like a run-heavy organization. Like, why go to Baltimore? Like, you were on the cusp with Kansas City. Just run it back with a guy you're.
Oh yeah.
But
please don't draft him in fantasy, guys. Do not draft DeAndre Hopkins in fantasy. Do not fall for it.
Maybe don't Mark. Was it Mark Andrews? Don't draft him either. I mean, I know everybody's out for blood with him, but what I do want to talk about really quickly is some of the additions that the Patriots made on top of Milton Williams. There, we brought in Carlton Davis III from Detroit. A couple people are saying we might have overpaid for him. I mean, if he's able to stay healthy and tandem with Christian Gonzalez in the backfield, that could be a scary secondary dynamic duo back there. I can't wait to see how that works out. And then I noticed Vrabel brought back Harold Landry from Tennessee, who actually didn't play that bad for Tennessee, which is kind of crazy to say, because Tennessee's been a horrific team the last couple of years too. Reason why they got the #1 pick. But he was a sack master down there, getting 19.5 sacks over the last couple of years. So hopefully he can return to form with the Patriots. And then we grabbed a couple of guys, Spillane from the Raiders there, who actually has been around the league. I was hoping we could talk to Brian about that. He was with the Pittsburgh for a little while there. He could give me a little insight to what I could look forward to. But, again, Brian's taking the night off, and we'll let him do that. But no, it's been great to see what the free agency has brought to our team specifically so far to this point. So what I want to do right now, buddy, is we're going to take a quick break just to hear from our sponsors really fast. And when we come back, we're going to talk about everything else around the league that we think is just crazy that we're going to get into. So don't go anywhere. The Fans First Football Show will be right back after these messages. All right, we are back here on the Fans First Football Show. Again, I am Hogan here, normally with Foxborough Frenzy, but again, I'm always a part of the Fans First Football Show with my good buddy Reed. Again, Brian is out tonight. Jess is out tonight. They're out partying somewhere. They're probably, you know what they are, Reed? They're probably out somewhere just like throwing beers back, having a grand old time, laughing at us sitting here doing the podcast instead. But you know what? Joke's on them, because we're having fun talking about some free agency craziness going on. Wouldn't
want to be anywhere else.
Exactly, right? So like I said, they're the ones missing out, but we love them. It's okay. They'll be back. I promise. They're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. But what we want to do now is we got into some of the stuff that our teams did early on in the show. We want to move on to the NFL kind of as a whole, and we want to talk about some of the big names, big moves that either shocked us or surprised us, or kind of that we feel were good fits or maybe bad fits. Obviously, we talked about DeAndre Hopkins. We don't like that he went to Baltimore, but you know what? Hey, if he's getting paid and he's happy, more kudos to you. But one kind of situation that I want to talk to you, Reed, about that it's very interesting. Last week, the news dropped that Davante Adams was going to the LA Rams. Obviously, there's a big to-do about Matthew Stafford, the potential of him coming back, and Sean McVay and that whole situation. And obviously, their offense was not a problem last year. Their offense, when they were healthy, with Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams, they're a dangerous team. You know better than anybody, because they actually played your Eagles the hardest in the playoffs this past season, where, they didn't, scare you, I would say, but they took you to the brink. It came down where there was the closest matchup. So the fact that they essentially nixed out Cooper Kupp and, he's gone. We'll talk about him in a minute. But before we get to him, replacing Cooper Kupp with Davante Adams, give me your immediate thoughts on that. Did they upgrade? Did they downgrade? Or are they kind of just right where they were before?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an upgrade. Davante did struggle with a bit of injuries last year, but towards the end of that run there with Rodgers, I mean, he looked like he was not his prime, but close to it. And I hate to do it, but I'm gonna say I think Kupp's a little bit washed at this point. Still struggling to stay healthy. That's always been a problem for him. But I really think the Rams wanted to spread the field more. And although I do think Puka and Kupp complement each other well with Kupp in the slot, if you have two X guys like that on the outside, you're definitely going to have more room to work with. And I think Sean McVay will be able to get more creative spreading the field that far because, it's like, it's almost going from like two extra, an X and a slot to two X receivers, which it seems like they want Stafford to be able to drive the ball downfield still to those guys. And, the capability of them in order to – this is also like super weird theory. Like, I have no idea this is true, but I was thinking like, well, if the Rams O-line is still as poor as it was last year, he has another guy that he can kind of just chuck up a 50-50 ball to, and
Right.
Kupp's not really that guy. But yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely an upgrade. But still interesting to me because they are paying them a similar amount. But I do think his time might be here.
Now, it's interesting that you bring him up because obviously he was released. And as a Patriots fan, I was sitting there like, go get him. We have tremendous success with undersized white guy receivers. Like all day, I will take him in a Patriots uniform. I would have loved to see Drake May throw to him. Unfortunately for me and other Patriot fans out there, we do not get to see that because he ends up going to a division rival with the Seattle Seahawks, where I believe he signed a 3-year, $48 million deal or something like that, which – like you said, if he's at the point where he's washed, that's a heck of a deal for a washed player. But I'm curious to see how he ends up in Seattle now, where they obviously made the move that they did to get Sam Darnold, where Geno Smith is no longer with them. We'll get to those guys in a little bit later on. But the biggest thing that I'm curious to see is if Cooper Kupp is naturally going to be the number one player or number one receiver, I should say, for the Seattle Seahawks, now with the subtraction of DK Metcalf. But then on top of that, too, Tyler Lockett is no longer there as well. So it's going to be the Cooper Kupp, Jackson Smith-Njigba show. That's a mouthful. Don't try and say that 10 times fast. Like I said, the two of them up there, it's going to be very interesting to see if Sam Darnold can replicate the success that he had with Minnesota with those two guys up there at this point. So kind of fascinating to see where they'll end up, especially in that tight division where San Francisco is coming off a hangover year from losing the Super Bowl previously. They didn't win too many games. They had a lot of injuries. They had a lot of players leave their system as well, too, where the NFC West is always kind of like the wild, wild West. You never know who's going to come out of there. I mean, we're sitting here talking about Seattle and LA. Arizona could go and win the division next year for all we know at this point. It's crazy out there.
But, yeah, it is a crazy decision. I do think I'm assuming the Rams will be the favorite. And I love watching the Niners downfall. I'm sorry. I've just grown to not have a dislike for them, and I've been loving their downfall. But anyway, talking about Seattle, man, I honestly I'm kind of confused. I don't really know what they're doing. I understand totally that, or at least I originally thought they're in full rebuild, create cat space mode. But signing Sam Darnold, I mean, dude, I think Geno Smith's better than Darnold, honestly. I think Brock Bowers' stock also goes up tremendously, in my opinion, with Geno there in I almost said Oakland, Las Vegas. But yeah, Seattle's not really making sense to me. I don't get why you're signing Darnold and Kupp to these long-ish term deals if you're kind of in that rebuild mode. To your point, though, about the wide receiver one, I do think JSN will probably still be that X receiver role and Kupp will be in the slot. But, we'll see. Just kind of puzzled by their moves so far.
Right. That's the biggest thing. Obviously, like you said, you figure they go into rebuild mode, trading away DK, trading away Geno to just replace them with high payments towards Sam Darnold and other ex-Jets rejects quarterback. And then Cooper Kupp, like at this point in his career where you're like, is he worth 3 years for that? But time will tell. We'll see with that. But
one more quick thing. Because I know I was kind of off on Sam Darnold all of last year too. Not gonna, I admit when I'm wrong. I was pretty right about that, I think. But dude, going from Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Hawkinson to JSN and Cup, I mean, it's like, dude, I'm worried for Seattle. I don't know. I mean, I think Mike McDonald's a great coach, but I think you might see the former Sam Darnold and the postseason Sam Darnold because he doesn't have the best receiver in the league, arguably the best wide receiver duo in the league. But yeah. Sorry, that was just my 2 cents on that.
No. You're spot on with that because I mean that's the question mark, right? Was last year a fluke for Sam Darnold? Time will tell. That's the biggest thing because he was a backup in Carolina. He was a backup in San Francisco for a reason before, he hit the thunderbolt of miracles in Minnesota last year. So, but like I said, we're going to stay on the West Coast, and a name that I really want you to give me some insight to that you're excited to talk about is Najee Harris going to the LA Chargers.
Yes.
Him going from Pittsburgh, where I had to look this up actually earlier. Did you know that Najee Harris has been in the league for 4 years and he's rushed for over 1,000 yards every year he's been in the league?
That is crazy because you would think that he had an off year. I guess it's because of like how high he goes in fantasy, but I totally agree with you. Like people expect him to be like putting up insane numbers, but it's almost like Mike Evans, like
right.
Just quiet 1,000 yards every single year.
Right, especially where he splits time with Warren in Pittsburgh, where you're like, no way he's got 1,000 yards this year.
Yeah, so true.
He's cracked it every year he's been in the league. His rookie year was still arguably his best, but now he goes to the run-loving Chargers team with Harborough out there, where they totally made it work with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards last year, 2 Baltimore rejects, and he took them and turned them into mastercrafts last year running the ball when Justin Herbert usually throws for 50 million yards every year. So, Reed, tell me your thoughts on Najee Harris going to the Chargers. Do you love it?
I love it, man. And Najee really should be that workhorse back, in my opinion. I think because Derrick Henry is so big, people forget how huge Najee Harris is. I mean, the dude's a freak of nature. And I love him, especially for fantasy purposes, going to Los Angeles. I mean, you know how Harbaugh's a run first guy. They're going to run the ball like crazy. And I think he's going to eat. I think he's going to have a great year. And, talking about the Steelers losing Najee, they did sign Kenny Gainwell from the Eagles, which I also love. I think that's a great signing. I think Warren and Gainwell are going to be a phenomenal 1-2 punch, but I do love it because I think Najee is more of that workhorse guy, that 3-down back, and he's going to get that in Los Angeles. And They'll probably sprinkle in Kimani Vidal a little bit too because they did spend some high draft capital on him. So.
Right. No, like I said, if there's any coach out there who can take advantage of the running back position, it's going to be a Harbaugh. You know that. Where obviously you see what John does in Baltimore with Derrick Henry, and you're going to see what Jim's going to do with Najee Harris. So absolutely fascinating stuff to see. For me, I want to talk about a guy that I think went a little bit under the radar that people, a former Charger actually, that we're talking about here, Joey Bosa finds himself in Buffalo, where Buffalo got rid of Von Miller after signing him to that ridiculous contract a couple of years ago that did not pan out whatsoever. But Joey Bosa going from the warm beaches of LA to snowy Buffalo in my division, where I certainly don't want to see him unless he's, going to be banged up and not play half the games. And by all means, enjoy your 1-year stay in Buffalo. But for me, it's going to be fascinating to see if he stays on the field, if he gets to return to form with him and his brother. At one point, they were considered, the duo. They were almost like the new Watt brothers in the NFL at one point.
100%.
But Joey's kind of fallen off that cliff a little bit, and obviously you can see why the Chargers decided to move on for him, where he's a little bit older than his brother Nick in San Francisco. But I'm going to be curious to see if Buffalo's able to take advantage of him on the field, where they let Von Miller go and kind of replace him with Joey there, where Buffalo's defense took a little bit of a step back last year. But again, they were able to make the pushes they did in the playoffs that they normally do, just falling a little bit short, as always, because it's the Buffalo way. I'm sorry. If there's any Buffalo fans out there, I gotta do it because I'm a Pats guy. I gotta talk smack. So gonna be interesting to see what happens with Joey Bosa. Where we're gonna stay in the division, and this was one I want to throw to you again, Reed, is we're gonna talk about another quarterback where we already touched on a former Jet quarterback in Sam Darnold. We're gonna talk about the newest Jet quarterback, and of course that is Justin Fields. Is there a bigger enigma in the NFL than Justin Fields and his career path at this point, with what he did in Chicago to then go to Pittsburgh to get them to a 4-0, start of the year, to then get benched for Russell, and then they kind of phased out, and now he signs a 2-year, $40 million deal with the Jets. Is there any other organization that is as dumb as the Jets? I'm gonna say it because I have to say it. So give me your thoughts on Justin Fields going to the New York Jets.
You know, it's funny. I don't know if Brian will agree with me, but I think it's more on the fantasy side of things. But I love Justin Fields as a fantasy quarterback. So for those purposes, I'm taking him late in every draft for sure. I think it's clear what they're doing. You know, bridge quarterback. They're gonna, I assume, draft a quarterback next year. But yeah, I mean, shout out his agent. 2-year, $40 million is a lot more than I thought he was going to get. I mean, he was in Pittsburgh for like under $1 million, wasn't he? So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, again, for fantasy purposes, I like it. For the Jets having any chance of being a winning franchise next year, I can't say I do. But hey, it'll be more exciting to watch than this year with Rodgers. At least we'll probably get to see some cool runs and some highlights. But yeah, I think it's good for the league just for entertainment purposes, but can't say if I'm a Jets fan, I'm like, hell yeah, let's go.
Well, you actually brought up a quarterback that I did want to talk about really quickly is the former Jets quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. Now, obviously, the quarterbacks have kind of gone where they have, where Geno going to Vegas kind of solidified Vegas a little bit, I would say, with Pete Carroll taking over as coach there. Yep. Sam Darnold going to Seattle, Justin Fields going to the New York Jets, where there's a few teams where there's still a question mark, whether it's Pittsburgh, whether it's Cleveland, whether it's Tennessee, technically. Do you see Aaron Rodgers eventually finding a home with any of these teams? And is it going to be Pittsburgh at this point?
It's funny. I think I'm on the cold side of this. I think most people do think that. I personally think they're going to keep Russ. I think that if I had to guess, Rodgers would become a New York Giant. That's just my 2 cents. It's not like I'm really like have any insider information on it. That's just what I have a feeling is going to happen. Because I did expect the Steelers to bring back one of Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, and the fact that Justin Fields is gone, I'm going to stay with my take here and think that they're going to keep Russell. But hey, who knows? But if I had to bet, I would say Aaron Rodgers will be a New York Giant.
All right, so everybody on DraftKings or anything like that, go take it to the bank, because Reed told you he's got the inside information. I believe it or not, I actually think it would be fascinating to see Rodgers to the Brett Favre path, where he went from Green Bay to New York and then ends up in Minnesota. I can't see it actually happening, but it would just be fascinating to see if that actually did come to fruition.
It would be so fascinating. And I wonder what I'm not really too familiar with the cap situation in Minnesota, but if they have the money, like, it does make sense, you know. I know they spent a lot of draft capital on JJ McCarthy, but look, if you want him to be in the same room as one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, or have Rodgers start the season just to see how it goes, I mean, I think it makes sense. But yeah, not too familiar with their cap situation, so we'll just have to wait and see.
Well, I know there's one team that would never want to see that happen, and that is the Green Bay Packers. I think they would throw up all over the place if they saw Aaron Rodgers wearing that purple Vikings uniform, just like Favre did after all those years. But all right, my friend, we talked enough about some free agency stuff. I want to get into just a couple of trades really quickly with you that actually, I don't know if some of them, these went really under the radar. Of course, the DK Metcalf to Pittsburgh deal was not under the radar, and I wish more than anything Brian was here to talk about it. Actually, the news broke right after we finished recording last week's episode, and he went crazy when it happened. So that obviously is a big one. Again, we talked about Geno to Vegas. Those are going to be fascinating to see where those former Seattle players are now with new homes there and how they match up. The biggest one with DK in Pittsburgh is going to be interesting to see how he's going to work with Pickens there, because everybody, I don't know if you've seen all the memes across the internet where it's just like the two of them lining up to fight referees and all this stuff with like just the craziness. But if those guys can get along with whatever quarterback ends up throwing them the football, it will be fascinating to see if it is going to be Russell Wilson throwing to DK again. But is that going to work in Pittsburgh for you, Reed?
You know, the internet's undefeated. The memes are so good, man. Like Mike Tomlin calling HB dive, and DK and George are like fighting DBs down the field. Or it was like a wrestling match, and it was like DK or George Pickens when DK asked to wear number 14, because they both wear 14. I can't wait to see what happens. But hey, I mean, that's two of the most above the rim, just throw it up, you know, F it, they're down there somewhere. That's like literally the definition of these two wide receivers. And I look, if Tomlin, I think Tomlin's addicted to locker room cancers, or just locker room people who are labeled as a locker room problem. Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, DK Metcalf, George Pickens. But if he can figure it out, I mean, that's probably the best duo in the NFL, right? I mean, I am biased, so I would love to say A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but Pickens and DK Metcalf are insane. If Tomlin can reel them in, I think it's going to be great. And the DK Metcalf trade is another reason why I thought that Russell Wilson's going to stay. I'm happy you brought that up because I forgot that was another reason. Bringing in DK Metcalf kind of leads you to believe that he already has a connection there with Russell. So maybe that's another hint at Russell Wilson staying there. But yeah, if Tomlin can handle it, I think it's super exciting for Pittsburgh.
I was going to say, if there's one coach who could handle it, it's got to be Tomlin with all the shenanigans he's dealt with. Like you said, you brought up all the names with Bell, Brown, all those clowns that have been running through Pittsburgh down there. Yeah. But let's get to a division foe for you there. And that, of course, is the Washington Commanders. They've made some moves. And believe it or not, actually, some free agents I forgot to talk about is they grabbed some former Patriots to go down there, Dietrich Wise and I believe Jonathan Jones, which they can have them. I want nothing to do with them, so it's fine. But one big move that they made was trading with the Houston Texans to get Laremy Tunsil, who is arguably one of the best tackles in the league, right? So,
yeah, I've been seeing that, and I see that he's Pro Bowl, but if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure he was like the most penalized player like the last 2 years. Like there's that one all-time clip where he false starts or illegal formation like 3 plays in a row to get the Texans out of field goal range, and obviously one player doesn't make up the O-line, but the Texans O-line was atrocious last year. Yeah, it's funny. This might be a totally hot take, and I can't put my hand up and be like, yeah, I've watched a lot of Laremy Tunsil film, but the only real things I've heard about him are how many penalties he commits. So to be honest, I'm not too upset about it. And they gave up a lot of draft capital, right, which again, I'm surprised about. I do hear where you're coming from though, because everything online that I've been saying, he's a great player, but I mean, penalties are a big part of the game too, so yeah, I don't know. I just know that he has a lot of penalties. So maybe I'm just trying to spin zoning it in my head to make me not worry. But to be honest, do I think that's the missing piece for the Washington Commanders to take us over? I don't think so.
No, and that I doubt that too. Obviously, it'll just be interesting to see how he fits in. Where he's not exactly 100%. He's not young anymore either. That's a big thing. But obviously, they want to protect their prized possession with Jaden Daniels there. One more Washington guy that I want to get to with you is obviously if the 49ers traded Deebo Samuel there. Obviously, if there's somebody who's washed up at this point, I think everybody across the league would probably laugh and say, yeah, it's got to be Deebo Samuel. Captain Drops over there, who when he said he had no problem dropping the ball. And I think it was like X was like fact checking him, being like, no, he's struggling. He's dropping balls. And it was hilarious to see that online. But
I loved it.
What do you think about Deebo going to Washington?
So this is like kind of different from Laremy Tunsil for me. Like I don't think Deebo's that great. He's not a receiver, that's for sure. Even when Ayuk went down, who was always the X, it went to Juwan Jennings, which tells you all you need to know, right? But he's a great gadget utility player, and I think oh my gosh, I'm blanking. The Washington OC.
Kingsbury.
Cliff Kingsbury. Yeah, I think he's gonna utilize him well. I don't think it's a great signing, but for the price they got it at, a 5th-round pick, I can see why that was justified. And it's just so on brand right now for the Commanders to just sign the oldest guys in free agency. It's like what they've been doing these past 2 years with Adam Peters. But yeah, I mean, for the price they got, I don't hate it. I just don't think well, then again, he doesn't have to be the wide receiver one. They have Scary Terry McLaurin. So I think he'll be a good gadget guy for them. Again, just doesn't really scare me as an Eagles fan.
No, just Scary Terry's the only one that scares you. That's why he's called Scary Terry.
Exactly.
So. Well, what I'm going to talk about is obviously some fatties, my old lineman that I love to talk about that made some moves. And a big one that came through is a former Patriot that ended up going to the Kansas City Chiefs, which still breaks my heart to this day. I'm talking about Joe Thuney, who actually just got shipped from Kansas City to Chicago, where you and I were talking pre-recording, Reed, that Chicago's made some moves to bolster that offensive line that they desperately needed to do because Caleb Williams, I believe, got sacked the 3rd most amount of times in NFL history in his rookie season last year. So he got the crap kicked out of him. And if you're trying to make a number one overall pick, your guy for the future, if you're getting sacked 68 times in a season, that is not going to make him your number one guy for a while there. So do you like what the Bears are doing at this point where they're trying to bolster that offensive line?
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of it was Caleb Williams himself too, but I see a lot of people saying that that's the only reason why, which is just not true. The O-line did not play well either. But I mean, look, I don't want to say that everyone's copying Howie, but you're seeing a lot of teams prioritize the trenches, and the Bears are doing it on both sides of the ball, on the offensive line and the defensive line. And look, that's the recipe for success. If you dominate in the trenches, that's just winning football, and especially with a rookie guy like Caleb. And I think Ben Johnson had a lot of influence on Ryan Poles this offseason too, because Ben Johnson, I'm sure, went up to Ryan Poles and was like, look at how amazing our offensive was with our O-line in Detroit. So we need to replicate that in Chicago. And look, I just think it's always going to – I think O-line always has to be your top priority. It's like a great Harbaugh quote from from Jim. He's like, offensive line is the only position group that doesn't depend on the offensive line. Like quarterback depends on offensive line. Receivers need time to get open. Running back needs to create the holes. And everything starts with the offensive line. So I think the Ryan Poles is doing good to bolster that.
My friend, I'm a former offensive lineman, and you just spoke to the heart of this fatty right here. That is you spoke to this fatty's heart, and I'd love to hear the praise just heaped on the offensive lineman. Keep it coming.
The best.
That's all I want to hear. If you want to put a smile on my face, just tell me how much you love the offensive line. So I love hearing that. Before we sign off tonight, Bud, I want you to walk me through the Eagles. Your Eagles have made a couple of trades there, and I want to talk about just two of them real quickly if you got some time. We were talking about Kenny Pickett got shipped to the Cleveland Browns. I actually like that deal a lot where they kind of swap quarterbacks for a draft pick as well. And then after that one, if you want to go into the CJ trade as well and tell me your thoughts on both of those.
Yeah, one of the most underrated things. I know a lot of Eagles fans are freaking out. That's why you tune into Broad Street LinkedIn because, I think, again, not saying I'm some guru, but a lot of casual.
Yes, you are. Don't downplay yourself.
I don't want to say casual fan, but I think a lot of people who watch just on Sundays and stuff, they're like, oh my gosh, we're losing everyone. But it's like, that's just, you had to know that was going to happen. Like we talked about in the beginning of the season. But the most underrated thing, and what I've been trying to tell a lot of Eagles fans that are a little bit worried, is Howie Roseman has been stacking draft picks, whether it be comp picks for players that we're trading or that free agents that we're losing or through trades. We have 20 picks for the next 2 years, which is insane. So, yeah, going back to what we lost, Kenny Pickett, I just think the meme is so funny where Myles Garrett said he wanted the Browns to get a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and then they got Kenny Pickett because technically he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
He's not wrong. He's not wrong.
Not wrong. Honestly, I don't think DTR is going to win the backup job here. I think it might be Tanner McKee, the Mormon Missile, but I think it was more for the draft pick, right? And that's right. What Howie was doing. Man, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, that one hurt. That one hurt a lot, I won't lie. I think I was expecting every other cut or free agent to let walk, but that one really hurt. He's the heartbeat of the defense. I don't think it's a coincidence that we go to the Super Bowl in 22 with him, crash out in 2023 and go back to the Super Bowl with him. But, he posted on Instagram about it, and he posted a video, went live. It's just Howie needs to sign these young guys, and we're going to make some of these young guys Eagles for a long, long time, and just have to save cap in some way. Can't say I was too happy about it, but I understand where Howie's coming from, and I've kind of just been saying this all off season. It's just, hey, and Howie we trust, and Howie we trust. I just remember we were signing Zach Bond, and I'm like, all right, well, I guess Devin White and Nakobe Dean are going to be the starting linebackers. And then next thing you know, Zach, we already gave him his flowers. I know Brian's going to be listening to this will you shut up about Zach Bond? But yeah, that's my motto. It's just in Howie we trust and Howie we trust. But yeah, we got Kenyon Green, which told me before we lost Mekhi Becton that we were going to lose Mekhi Becton because we're bringing in another guard. He was the lowest rated offensive lineman according to PFF. But he was a former first-round pick, I think 2 years ago. And, hey, Jeff Stoutland University, probably the most valuable coach on the Eagles. Hopefully he can turn it around like he did with Becton. But, yeah, we didn't touch on Becton either. But he was one guy that I thought we might actually have a chance of bringing back. But we just couldn't get a deal done. It would have to have been on a discount too. I'm happy for him. Wish him the best. But before we sign off, I did have two other free agency things I wanted to shout out. Two Jags guys. Shout out Jess. We missed you today, Jess, but I love you guys bringing in Evan Ingram. You needed another weapon on that Broncos offense, especially in the receiving game, and especially with the lack of free agent receivers. I think this is the next best thing you could have done. I think Evan Ingrams is going to be a great, reliable veteran target for Bo Nix. And then Christian Kirk going to Houston, I think solidifies that Diggs will be out of Houston. Houston or Diggs changed roles a lot. Stephon Diggs, he went from being that X number one to being a red zone machine. Obviously, gruesome knee injury to end his season, but I think wherever he goes, unlike DeAndre Hopkins, he'll be a great red zone guy. But yeah, I just wanted to shout out those two Jacksonville guys before we signed off here.
Absolutely. And I'm sure Jess and Brian will be back on at some point to heap the praise all of their teams as well when they come back and grace us with their presence on the show to let us know how either happy or sad they are. Because Jess is going to be playing his Superchargers little tune there, and then Bo leaving all over the place. And Brian's not going to shut up about DK Metcalf, Darius Slay, all the guys that Pittsburgh got in the offseason. So if you guys out there are curious about other affiliates that we have on the Fans First Sports Network, you can find the Steel Curtain Network. You can find Mile High Broncos. You can find LinkedIn. I'm sorry. Reed, give me the name.
No worries. Broad Street LinkedIn.
I'm saying LinkedIn. I'm so linked in, obviously, with what you got going on over there. So I apologize. You can find me, Hogan, over at Foxborough Frenzy, where we talk about all things Patriots. But if you are just a sports fan in general, check out all the things on Fans First Sports Network. So before we go, buddy, I got to do it for Brian, even though he's not here. We got to say 2 words. You know them well, and then we'll get the heck out of here. And it's just these words. Go football.
Hell yeah.
Never slow.